I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Rafe Mair, former BC Cabinet Minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host, and of course the most prominent political commentator in Lions Bay, BC. Welcome back to the show, Rafe.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Do you have any particular issue that you really want to talk about right off the bat?
Well, I'm very distressed with what's happening with Elizabeth May and the Green Party. And I know that many would say, well, the Green Party isn't really that important. Well, it is really. It's become a worldwide force. Now, it has never had power or actually had office, but it does have power. And it has the power to persuade those in office to do things that I, for one, happen to think are things that must be done. And I think Elizabeth has done a wonderful job in establishing its bona fides in Canada, not, I might say, in BC, but we can talk about that, but in Canada. And I think that to have her threaten to leave, and I think you can take it she will leave now, over an issue that has nothing whatever to do with environmentalism, and B, if you have to have it as an issue, and I don't know why they do, but if you have to have it on an issue, she is definitely on the wrong side of history. And to think that the Green Party, that all that, the hope it's held out for a lot of environmentalists like me, will crumble for a period of time anyway, based on this, I think is very sad. But it's also personally very sad, Jim, I've got to say. I don't usually get to know political figures all that well, even the ones I served with. But I've got to know Elizabeth pretty well, and I'm very fond of her. I mean that, of course, as a person. And we've carried on a correspondence, and I think become pretty good friends over the last few years. And I'm sorry to see that relationship strained. So that's definitely on my mind now. I think the Green Party is a very important part of our political makeup in Canada, even though it only has one seat, but it represents a great deal of opinion in Canada, and to have it start to crumble, at least in the short term, over something that never ought to have been part of it, it is very troubling to me.
Well, for those not familiar with the issue, what is it?
Well, apparently the Green Party passed a resolution to support BDS, which is the boycott situation that is worldwide against the state of Israel, to force her to deal fairly with Palestinians and the state of Palestine. And this is a highly emotional issue, of course, particularly amongst Jewish people. The difficulty is, and has come about so clearly here, is that the state of Israel, Mr. Netanyahu, and their, if I may call them, handmaidens, the Canadian Jewish Congress and similar organizations, take it that any criticism of the state of Israel is anti-Semitic. Now that's a horrible thing to do, and it's totally unfair to an enormous amount of people, including me, and I presume including you, and a lot of others that comment upon international affairs. But that's what they do. So you get yourself in this horrible position of saying, I think that Mr. Netanyahu ought to resign, or he ought to stop stealing people's houses and burning them to the ground, and that sort of thing, and suddenly you are anti-Jewish. And that's just a terrible thing. Well, that, of course, is right in the midst of this. What apparently happened, and it's hard to believe, this motion was passed at a convention. Elizabeth was there. She did not speak, but says now she couldn't speak because her mic was broken. which doesn't strike me as a particularly good excuse or explanation for the leader of a party. In any event, that's what she says. It was passed, and she now wants it to go, and I don't know whether it's fair to say is threatening to leave because of that, but certainly has declared that she intends to leave. And obviously it's over this. And it's got the party in a pretty horrible position. And as I say, two things. I think that if that is an issue the Greens would want to deal with, and I can understand why they would, but if it is, I believe that Elizabeth is on the wrong side of history, and I think that most, I shouldn't say all, but most Jews that I know, any of it, would agree. And the better Jewish opinion in the United States, including now getting into the Democratic Party, is that Netanyahu is wrong, and that they have to recognize the Palestine. So it's not as if it is us against them, but the Jewish people naturally are not anxious to have fights in their community and amongst their family and friends and so on. So there isn't a great outspokenness about this any more than there would be in our ethnic groups if a similar thing came up. But in any event, that's where it stands. And so it's got the overtones of causing a great deal of bitterness quite apart from environmentalism. And that's what I find so distressing. I find myself now, for example, in a pissing match with a fellow that I work with on the environmental side who happens to be Jewish, and although he is sort of holding back, is making it very clear that if I don't go along with those who want to get rid of this motion in the Green Party, then I must be anti-Semitic. And, so the arguments overlap. And it's most unfair and most destructive to the party, and I think unfair to the community. And perhaps, Jim, good things often come out of bad things. And maybe the realization of this is going to be what comes out of all of this. I hope so, but it's very unpleasant at this point.
Well, you'd think the Green Party would stick to its guns when it comes to defending the environment. With them voting on an issue that concerns Israel, a country they have no influence over, it reminds me when Vancouver City Council voted that it was against having atomic weapons on the moon. Like, what control do they have over that?
Well, that is true. The only thing about BDS is that it has become a national issue in the Parliament of Canada, where the Greens, of course, have Elizabeth May as a member. Whether or not we should continue this or have this boycott, we don't have it now. But many people think that we should boycott Israel or put pressure on Israel, at least, to be fair to the Palestinians. So it has become a national issue. Elizabeth May is the national leader of the Green Party, so there is the connection, and maybe the party thought that they had to express an opinion, and maybe they're right. But it certainly has caused a hell of a lot of trouble that they didn't bargain for, and it's something that a new party really doesn't need. But as I say, I think the green movement around the world, if you look at the record of the last 25 years and the changes that their influence has forced around the world, is still a major political power in Canada, whether it has seats in the House of Commons or not. But there it is. It's just an awkward situation, and as I say, I don't want to take it too far because it's a very personal one with me. I find that I have a friendship very, very badly strained out of it, and I frankly don't know why.
Well, one thing about the Greens, too, that I always wonder about, we hear about their environmental policies, but it's true. This is foreign affairs. If you're going to be a national party, you have to have a platform on that. What's their stand on economic issues and social issues and on human rights here in Canada? I never hear anything about that.
Well, that's interesting. We've been, a bunch of us have been sort of chatting that up, and that issue obviously comes up. And my answer to that is that no party has any policy on any of those things except the formal one of the moment, because they can't afford to be too dogmatic. There are too many people who wouldn't stay with the party if it went the other way. So political parties, the general ones, the big ones, three big ones, are very careful to allow lots of room for fluffing around and waffling and so on and so forth. And And we will always complain, you and I particularly. Parties no sooner get themselves staying on one line and wow, they're off onto another one. They're not keeping their word. They're not doing what they said they would do. And they're not saying do what they said they would do, because if they do, they will piss off a lot of their members. So it's all a very iffy thing. And I guess what I'm saying is, yes, you're right. They have to come up with a policy. But on the other hand, don't judge them too harshly, because coming up with a policy isn't all it's cracked up to be with the major parties either. So it's a difficult thing. But you're right that they have to have something by which they're identified other than environmentalism. But let me just quickly end on that too. That is not easy, because I don't think that there is any member of a serious member of the Green Party that now would go as far as way out environmentalists would do and cut out all development and that sort of thing. They would now rather find a formula for combining good environmentalism and development. And maybe you can't do that. That may be a contradiction in terms, but at least that's the way a lot of them are looking. And those are the things I would expect the Green Party to be working on and developing and getting people to understand just where they stand on that. But, I think you're basically right. They have some policies they've got to establish. But secondly, I say, don't judge them any more harshly than we really should judge the Liberals and Conservatives and the NDP, because they're no hell at keeping their word either.
We'll have more with Rafe Mair right after the break.
GEM International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109 carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior with a proven operator and finance team. GEM International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Rafe Mair. Rafe, hearings are starting to happen across Canada about electoral reform. Is this a bad time to do it over the dog days of summer?
Well, I don't know that you're ever going to find a good day for it, Jim, but I'll tell you, this is another thing that troubles me very, very much. And I know I'm beginning to sound like an old grouch, but after all these years, you do pick up a few things if you keep your eyes open. And I now see the Liberal Party of Canada holding public meetings with their lovely MPs out there to hear what the people want to say and take it back to the House of Commons. And, we're not going to have a referendum. We don't need that. What we need is for Parliament to understand what the people are saying. Well, I'm here to tell you that may not be rubbish, but there's an entirely different side of that story that they're not letting you know about. First of all, to think that the Liberal Party of Canada is doing this just for the public weal, just to make sure we're all happy and doing things the way we want to, is nonsense. And to think that they're not looking at this with the idea of how do we come up with something that helps us get elected in central Canada, you have to be permanently naive. That's exactly what's happening. And to think that the MPs are going back and report faithfully people like me and others who were saying, wait a minute, you've got to be smoking something illegal. That's not happening. That's not the way the Liberal Party of Canada works. It's not the way the Conservative Party works either, nor do I suspect the NDP. But they pretend that that's what's doing, and what bothers me, Jim, is so many people believe it. They accept it, and it's just nonsense. Now, let's just talk for a second about the other side of that coin. And here's another place, I'm afraid, that Elizabeth May and I have crossed swords on the question of a referendum. Well, those who are smarter than me say, well, what referenda do is they advance the cause of weird outfits and minor outfits and all that sort of thing, and they disturb the public peace, and you don't need that. We've got MPs to do that. Well, as I just pointed out, Jim, the MPs do not represent their constituencies at all. They represent the interests of their political parties, always have, always will. And secondly, who's to say that you and I are not able to decide what system we would like to use when we vote? Now, I take people back to the classic example, which the elite, particularly in central Canada, want us all to forget, have just erased out of the history books, is the Charlottetown Accord referendum. Now, as you will remember, I was in the thick of that, right up to my eyeballs. And I was accused of all sorts of terrible things. The Prime Minister called me a traitor. John Crosby called me Canada's most dangerous man because I was disrupting what the establishment was telling us was the way to go. The way to go was the Mulroney way to go, and that agreement was the best agreement that Canada could have, would bring us all together, etc. Well, I fought, other people fought, and of course it was defeated. I might say by 67.9% in British Columbia. Now, looking back at that, was that defeated because some wild-eyed guy with a microphone went across the province and rallied the folks? Not at all. What happened is that people listened. They demanded to have a copy of the agreement, which Mulroney wouldn't first give them. They demanded to see it, to read it, to know about the Constitution, to know what it meant, and they asked awkward questions like, tell me, Prime Minister, what does distinct society mean? Well, he said it means nothing. And they said, well, Prime Minister, if it means nothing, why do we have it? If it means something, what does it mean? And those sort of things, those questions, were interpreted and are interpreted this day as being disloyal, anti-Canadian, and so on. But they weren't. They were very practical questions from people who wanted to know how they were going to be governed, and I might say in British Columbia, from people who suspected that whatever happened, it wasn't going to be good for them. So what is wrong with referenda is that the people in charge don't like them. That's what's wrong with them. And I've had 2 referenda in British Columbia where I was very, very unhappy they lost, the voting ones that we had back in the 90s. But the people spoke. It was fully aired, campaigned, etc. The people spoke. That was the decision. I accepted. I'd like to change it sometime, but I accept it. But you cannot say that the referendum is wrong just because it's going to disappoint the people who are not accustomed to being disappointed. And that's why I'm saying that at least we have to have a public discussion on that, as well as letting the Liberal Party go back and put together in their cozy little Ontario caucus what the rules are going to be. And I know that sounds harsh, Jim, but and I hate to fall back on this, but I've been around for nearly 85 bloody years, and I've kept my eyes open and my ears open, and I've seen what's happened, and I've been in the midst of those constitutional conversations, and I've met and broken bread with the people of the elite that were making the decisions. And I know what they're like, and I know what it's about, and I know that it's time for the people to say their piece and the elite to abide by what the people have to say.
So we really do need a referendum if they decide to change the election system.
Oh, the question is going to be, how in the hell can you say to the people of BC, for example, we're going to bring you democracy so you can have a fair vote, no more of this first past blah, 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 blah. However, we will tell you what that new fair democratic process is going to be because we don't trust you to. I mean, the whole thing is preposterous. But again, Jim, what worries me is so many people swallow it. So many people are just prepared to go along with it because that's the way it has always been. And that's tragic. And I guess I should get a little quieter and older and settle down with my glass of wine a day and let somebody else worry about it. But God damn it, it bothers the hell out of me.
Rafe, another issue that's been brought up by Sharon Noble, the director of the BC Coalition Against Smart Meters, is the fact that the BC Hydro tariff since 1980 has a clause that says BC Hydro cannot be held liable for any damages caused by their employees, even if those damages were done deliberately.
Oh, I know. There are things like that are so wrong, Jim, and that's just one example. And a lot of them are sort of not quite as clear, but work out just as clearly. And we take no measures to stop it. We don't have a lot of measures. That sort of thing ought to be attackable in court instantly on the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But we are such a peaceful people. Now, I don't want us to be warlike people, but I would like to see us get a little gumption once in a while and stand up and say, wait a minute, a bunch of us are going to get together, we're going to go to court, we expect the court to fairly evaluate this and tell us how this can possibly be. How can it be that Rafe Mair and company owns a truck and he goes out and kills somebody and the company is destroyed by the damages that are properly attained? And BC Hydro go do whatever they bloody well want, blow bridges up or blow anything up, and not be responsible. That is just nonsense. It goes back to the days where the Crown couldn't be responsible. It took a couple of centuries to get rid of that. And this is the thing, and it goes back to what I've been saying, Jim. It's the nature of the beast in Canada. We just don't like to make waves. And when people do, they're sort of held up to be kind of oddballs, and I guess we need them, but they'll go away soon, and everything will go back to normal. And this is the very distressing part of Canada going into a modern era where these sorts of things are going to be passé, and many important forces are now alive and well throughout the world, and not the least of which is the one that forced the Brexit in Great Britain. These things are going to happen. They're going to change. Either Canadians will be there, alive to them, and participating, or we'll just take whatever comes. And the latter worries me very much because we seem to be willing to do that.
Well, Hydro's latest proposal to the BC Utilities Commission in their tariff application is the right to turn off your power without notice, regardless of the consequence. So what if you freeze to death in the winter or you're on a life support system? Something I think you're pretty personally aware of.
Well, Jim, take this just a little bit further. I know you probably everybody will chuckle at me at this, but how come I've got to deal with BC Hydro where they provide me with power, and when they don't provide the power to me for whatever reason, I still have to pay? I mean, I don't understand this. They say, oh, it's the act of God or something. Acts of God seem to come around the same time every year with the same bloody trees and the same bloody power poles. This is the lackadaisical attitude that comes from us taking the attitude that, oh, well, I guess that's okay. And BC Hydro has got to be held accountable like anybody else is. And I just don't understand why it isn't. It's one of these puzzlements that it's with us, and every once in a while, at the outbreak of poison ivy, a bunch of people get together and say this is wrong, and then it sort of subsides and goes away. And I despair for it. I really do. Of course, I'm a miserable old bastard. I understand that. Not everybody wants to be like that, and I understand that too. But still in all, we've got to get a little spunk in our lives.
Rafe, thank you so much for chatting with us.
My pleasure always, Jim.
My guest has been Rafe Mair, former BC Cabinet Minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host. You should check out his website, rafeonline.com. You're listening to The Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. You can find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. If you have questions for the show, you can email info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on The Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.